Hey everyone, it's Phil Hall of West Fair Communications, and thank you for joining us in this week's episode of West Fair's Video Conversations. And I'm joined by Robert Cioffi, who is the co-founder and chief operating officer of Progressive Computing. And it looks like you're on the Starship Enterprise from what I can tell in the background. So,
I would like to think that I were, but this is about as close as I'll get to being on the actual Enterprise.
well, we're going to beam you down for today's episode on something which is a little more scary than anything that Captain Kirk and his friends ever encountered, I think, and that's cybersecurity in today's computing age, particularly with folks who are working from home. As you can see, I'm in Casa Phil, and I'm speaking to you directly from my computer, and I do all my work from here, and I have an off-the-shelf antivirus software that I have downloaded that gives me periodic updates as to what is happening on my PC, and I've been getting a lot of good news, which is nice. But is that enough to keep me safe from the cyber security miscreants who are out there on the internet?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you have antivirus installed on your computer is a good start. It's a necessary line of defense, but it's not the only one that you need to protect yourself. Hackers are finding ways around a lot of the traditional protection systems. So while it is a bit old, I don't want to say old school, it's a bit more traditional types of defense, but still a necessary one.
I would imagine that since the pandemic happened and so many people are working remotely, that IT officers are pretty much tearing their hair out and trying to keep everybody safe in a uniform way. Have you been aware of situations where companies that have a large remote workforce have been under cybersecurity attack?
I mean, I can share with you just in general some experiences. I can't really name names. I mean, most of our interactions are with customers under our care. But I will say this, that some of our customers were long prepared for this type of situation well before the pandemic struck, because they had adopted a very cloud-centric strategy, meaning they were not beholden to equipment in their office, that they could run virtually anywhere. And they did so as an intentional strategy. And so for those people, it was easy enough to pick up and go home, literally just take their laptop, plug it in, and in their home internet connection, and they were, good to go, as they were structured beforehand. For some of our accounts, they were on the extreme opposite side of that strategy picture. And you would think, or you can think more traditionally like a nonprofit that had limited budgets with just an infrastructure within their offices, and now they were all forced to work from home, and that made remote working or working from home an incredibly difficult thing to do logistically, and then add in the components of security. And most of our accounts sort of fell somewhere in the middle there. Most were set up pretty well. Needed a little help getting to be not only productive but secure. But we did have a number of accounts that were struggling because of the security issues.
Well, people aren't just working at home from their laptops or from their desktops. Some of us take our iPads or our iPhones out to the park or to local fast food joint and do our work from there on Wi-Fi.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I imagine that is just a bad situation waiting to get worse when it comes to cybersecurity.
Well, it certainly doesn't help, and it's more of what we kind of call the attack surface area, right? You're increasing the attack surface area. So if I could paint a picture in your mind of a house with a lot of windows and doors, right? A very, very large house with maybe hundreds or thousands of windows and doors. You're now responsible to protect each one of them, to make sure that they're all alarmed, that they're locked, that there's security guards that are patrolling those areas and whatnot. But if you had a structure that only had, let's say, one window and door, then it's a lot easier to control the access that's coming in and out of that establishment or that home or that business or whatever the case may be. So by taking your iPad or your iPhone out into a public Wi-Fi setting like a coffee shop or a fast food place, or out in the park where there might be some free Wi-Fi connection, you certainly are making it, you're adding yet another window or door in that structure to allow hackers to be able to infiltrate. And they know this, right? They know that more and more people are doing this. The hackers are always going to go after the low-hanging fruit and the easy targets. And make no mistake, they're very aware of, situationally aware of what our habits are and what trends are. So this whole working from home scenario has opened up a Pandora's box of different things that they are doing to take advantage of people who are working in remote situations.
Well, during this whole pandemic period, I've heard several stories of companies holding Zoom meetings and some jokesters coming in. I think it's called Zoom bombing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that is the correct term, yeah.
And having a bit of fun at the company's expense, but that's not really quite fun, is it? Particularly
No, not fun at all. There were some gaps in Zoom's popularity. Excuse the the pun here, but took zoomed way up, and that exposed some of the weaknesses in their security that was never really thought of ahead of time. I think Zoom did a really good job. And by the way, most of the remote conference solutions like Zoom had similar issues. I think Zoom just unfortunately became the poster child for it from a PR perspective. I think, they were punished maybe a little too severely because every other company had similar types of security holes. And what I mean by that is that you can set up a meeting by default with no security and just let anybody who has that link connect. And, we quickly figured out, if that link that gets put out in an email gets shared with somebody who shouldn't see it or gets posted in a public place like a website, then that could invite some strangers that, shouldn't be there, either listening in for a corporate espionage or just looking to be disruptive or even just to have some fun, if you consider that sort of thing fun.
Well, one thing I know that's not fun is ransomware, and we're recording this episode during the first week of September, and 1 or 2 days ago, I don't know if you saw this in the news, the school system in Hartford, Connecticut was supposed to start the first day of school, and it was canceled because there was a ransomware attack there. And this is it's almost becoming daily news now that some company or government agency is undergoing that. Is there any way that this can be stopped? Because it just seems to be getting out of control.
Yeah, it's when I get questions like this, the answer is a very broad one, but it's an important one that I'm trying to make, is that your layers of defense must be very deep, right? You must have many layers of defense. And when I'm talking about defense, I'd like to cite some of the non-traditional things that people don't often think about, because they quickly think about firewalls and antivirus and some protection software, or somebody like me and my team who are sitting in a place like this that are, clacking away all day long trying to protect you. The end user is really the person who can offer some of the best protection through security awareness training by not clicking on attachments or being able to discern the difference between a fake email and a real email. Now, none of these systems unto themselves or even in combination are foolproof. So there's always going to be some way that a hacker is going to make it into your system. If the size of the prize is large enough, they're going to figure out a way to get in one way or the other. But you can minimize this by adopting a methodology and strategy from an IT perspective that adds in so many layers of defense that it just makes your prize not big enough for the hackers to want to waste any time trying to break through all those layers.
You mentioned about ways of getting in. I'm reminded of a story somebody had told me about a company. I'm not going to mention which one it is, but wound up getting hacked because they had a vending machine in their office that was attached to the internet as one of those IoT type of things. and the hackers were able to get in through that. And I was wondering, why is the vending machine attached to the internet? You're just there to get chips and candy bars.
Yeah, the most why? Because it's super convenient, right? Somebody thought that, hey, this would be great. We can, the company who fills that machine can get daily and even hourly and minute by minute updates, and then they know to send the guy tomorrow to refill the Snickers, because otherwise he'll have to come and look. But now he'll know because he'll get an instant electronic communication. So yeah, that's awesome. But what I would classify this as something called shadow IT. And what I mean by this is that someone on the business side is making a decision with a vendor to connect something to the system without IT's knowledge or involvement because they think it's innocent enough. So the classic things are things like end users who will just go and subscribe to a service, let's say a Dropbox. Now, I don't mean to malign Dropbox or say that it's insecure, but like any tool, it can be used in an insecure manner. And if an end user is in control of that security and hasn't involved IT, then they can unnecessarily be exposing the organization to some security risks. Had you involved IT, we could have had a conversation about it, developed a strategy. In the case of the vending machine, we could have said, well, there's some things that we can do to segregate this so that it's not touching other corporate systems, right? And still will give you the net result that you're looking for, but in a much more secure way. So it's really important to bring IT, whether it's outsourced like what our company does, or whether it's an in-house staff, that they have to be involved in these kinds of decisions. They really need to be acutely aware of what's going on. Otherwise, we just don't know. And how do we protect what things that we don't even know about?
Last week, I had to go to see my dentist, and I see him twice a year. A couple of weeks back, I saw my GP for my annual checkup. So I'm getting my teeth checked twice a year. I'm getting my overall health once a year. What is the best checkup schedule for computer security?
Oh, well, it's certainly not happening at a frequency of once or twice a year. I can tell you that. It's a constant. I mean, we install monitoring systems that are working 24/7, 365. They're constantly looking for issues, constantly in, I'll call that bloodhound mode, right? Sniffing, looking, checking, making sure. Now, there are other systems that we have that layer on top of that, that, for instance, will go out to the dark web periodically and look for stolen credentials. That's something that happens every couple of days, or every day there might be a single notification for things like that. And then there's things like I kind of mentioned earlier about end user awareness. We want to educate end users, so can we put end users through hourly training videos? No, we would be, there would be, I'd have a lot of angry people on my hands. It's too much training. So what's the right balance? Well, probably a 5-minute video training once a month might be a good idea to just, drive awareness. We also do things like fake phishing attacks. So once a week, we'll try to get people to click on emails that they shouldn't, and then we get notifications and reporting. So there are different things that can be done at various frequencies that make sense, but a lot of the frontline stuff is happening in a constant active mode, constantly looking for issues and problems, while other secondary systems are looking at, at a less frequent but more reasonable or applicable schedule.
Well, we've been talking about cybersecurity in general. Let's spend a minute talking about progressive computing in particular.
Sure.
Tell us a bit about your company, where you're based, and what your focus is.
Yeah, so we were established in 1993, so it's 27 and about a half years now. I still count half years. I don't know why. I guess I'm sentimental. Yeah, go figure, an IT guy with emotions. So it's, when we started, we were doing not what we were doing today. It was a lot of DOS-based application development, and I won't bore you with the long history that we've gone through, but the term managed service provider, or MSP, is becoming more widely known outside of the IT industry, business owners and key decision makers know what an MSP is now. Essentially, we're an outsourced IT service provider for our customers, which are typically businesses that have anywhere between 10 and 125 computers within their organization that need maintenance, support, security, and on top of just the daily things that we do, like virtual help desk and on-site field technicians, but we develop strategy roadmaps, technical strategy roadmaps that are aligned to their business goals and strategies. So we often will sit down with key decision makers and CEOs and say, what's your business plan? And what are the things that you're thinking about? And then how do we align technology to help solve those problems? So it's really everything from the day-to-day stuff all the way up to that strategic conversation that we're having with our customers.
You mentioned 1993. I remember I used to work with a young lady. We had computers. Do you remember the old big floppy disks? And
I sure do. I got one stuck on my door right now, just as a novelty.
Well, she actually has them as earrings because we changed computer systems and we couldn't use them anymore. So she just
created earrings. I've seen all sorts of things. People throw them around the office like frisbees.
Yeah.
But it's a novelty now to find those things.
What do you think is going to be the next computer novelty if we were to go 20, 25 years ahead? And the technology we're using today, people will probably be looking at the iPhone and thinking that's almost Neanderthalic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question. And if I could answer that, if I could provide you an accurate answer, I'd probably be a very rich man today, and I am not. So this is pure speculative guesswork, but it is interesting to look at or comparatively the technology that we were using 25 years ago when 27 years ago when I started this, right? Or my first computer, which is actually stuck in a box over here that I begged my parents to buy me in 1981. So, and I still have it, it still works, believe it or not. So to look at how technology has transformed and changed over the years is just outstanding. But now to answer your question, well, what does tomorrow look like? Well, I can tell you that it's going to be very cloud-centric. The devices that you have in your hand today will become less and less, in my opinion, will become less and less of a requirement. Essentially, you're going to be able to walk up to almost any screen anywhere and be able to just connect to all your data and information. So it's not about devices, it's more about data and processing and information and storage. And we're kind of on that path now already. So that's not very visionary for me, admittedly, to say that. But I think the devices will become less and less of importance, and what will become more importance is the services that are running behind the scenes.
But you could also look at it on the flip side, because here where I live in Connecticut last month, we had a tropical storm that came through the state, and I think about anywhere up to 90% of the people lost power for a while, and that's not surprising because power distribution is being done by a 19th century technology. Wires run.
You are correct. Yes, and this is what I, as a resident, I'll take myself out of the IT industry. As a resident of Westchester community, I've been up in arms and screaming about burying power lines, and I know it's a very expensive proposition. But when I travel to different parts of the country and I don't see telephone poles anywhere, and they don't suffer what we suffer, because of our, beautiful greenery, which let's keep the trees, but can we get rid of the poles? Can we bury those lines? I know it's easy to say, but I would think, moving out 30 years, let's just paint that picture that we're going to see telephone poles disappear, wires disappear. We're going to be much more dependent upon towers, like we have cell towers today. We won't be able to get our power that way. But you might also see a lot of cogeneration of power, like solar, on your own premise, so that you're much less dependent upon a grid system and more dependent upon what you have locally right there.
Do you find in your work there are still offices out there that are relying on somewhat antiquated systems? I'm aware of some offices I've been to that are still running Windows 7.
And that would be a major security problem. I mean, we started talking about security. I'll go right back there. If you're still using Windows 7, please understand that Microsoft has dropped support for it. What I mean by that is they're no longer releasing any security updates for that. And so if your organization, especially if it's subject to any kind of compliance like HIPAA or any kind of SOC compliance, and there's tons of them out there. I mean, even NY Shield, which is a new law that passed earlier this year, says that you have to take prudent measures to protect employee and customer information of any New York State resident. And as a company who employs 30 people, I'm subject to it. Just about everybody is subject to it. I would say that running Windows 7 is not prudent. So do we see this? Sure, we see it. There's a natural attrition that happens that, that Windows 7 machine is going to eventually die. So, but that's no way to really manage technology, is to wait for things to break. You really should be on a proactive maintenance to keep your operations running smoothly. And we can run through the TCO and the ROI on why that makes a lot more sense. But I mean, listen, we come across places that have champagne taste and beer budgets, and they just simply can't afford to do it. And, not everybody with a computer is a customer. But, if they're really serious about their productivity and meeting their business goals and achieving their strategy and being compliant and working in the 21st century, then you need 21st century technology.
Well, our time is actually coming to a close now, but if people wanted to continue the conversation with you, how would they be able to get in touch with you?
Sure. I mean, there's a number of different ways. First, our website, which probably has just about everything that you can find about us, is progressivecomputing.com. So again, that's www.progressivecomputing.com. Our Westchester office is based in Yonkers. Our phone number is 914-375-3009. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. I happen to be a little bit of a LinkedIn junkie. I go through kind of phases where I'm super active, and maybe right now I'm in the phase of a little less active, but I'm looking at it many times a day. And so you can look me up there and connect with me if you found any of this informative, or if you'd just like to continue the conversation with me that way.
Or even have a chat about Star Trek, for that matter.
I am a huge Trekkie. It is a requirement in my family to also be a Trekkie, otherwise you get emancipated. I'm only kidding. But my oldest daughter is a Star Trek nut as well. So yeah, it's all good.
Robert Cioffi, thanks so much for being a guest on today's episode of the West Fair Video Conversations, and live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper, Phil. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, folks, that's it for today. We'll see you next week. Have a good one.